Welcome, all of you, here in Hodge Hill and online for our last in our God in the Ruins series, leading us into Holy Week. A conversation on and an invitation into the darkness of God. Unlike previous sessions, we're going to set this one more explicitly within prayer and worship tonight, responding to Jesus's call to us to tarry a while, as Selena Stone's brilliant Lent book has reminded us. And so we're going to begin with some music and then a bit of silence, which I'll introduce in a moment.
My soul is troubled with pain so deep. My friends, I beg you, don't fall asleep. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Tarry a while in the darkness. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Don't leave me to grieve all alone.
During Lent in Hodge Hill, we have been using some of Cole Arthur Riley's Black liturgies to help shape our worship, including some of her breathing prayers. And so in the silence that follows the second verse of Watch and Pray, I invite you, if it's helpful for you, to use these words as you breathe in and out. So as you inhale, do not be afraid. As you exhale, liberation is coming. Do not be afraid. Liberation is coming.
I'll beg my Father, this cup may pass. Of you, my companions, much less I ask. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Tarry a while in the darkness. Watch and pray. just 1 hour, please stay awake to give me comfort while my heart breaks. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Tarry a while in the darkness. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Don't leave me to grieve all alone.
Now, Joy is going to lead us in some prayers with the response that's on the screen.
For the darkness of waiting, of not knowing what is to come, staying ready and quiet and attentive, we praise you, O God.
Darkness.
For the darkness of staying silent, for the terror of having nothing to say, and for the greater terror of needing to say nothing, we praise you, O God.
Darkness.
For the darkness of loving, in which it is safe to surrender, to let go of our self-protection, and to stop holding back our desire, we praise you, O God.
Darkness and the light.
For the darkness of choosing, when you give us the moment to speak and act and change, and we cannot know what we have set in motion, but we still have to take risk. We praise you, O God, for the darkness and the light of both, and light to you. For the darkness of hoping in a world which longs for you, for the wrestling and laboring of all creation, for wholeness and justice and freedom, we praise you, O God. Light to you. Lord, grant us the faith to wait together in darkness and uncertainty, for it is there we will find you. Amen.
Rachel and Carlton are both treasured friends of mine. Rachel and I shared a USPG root group in Salford in 1997. Carlton, much more recently, through our connection with Queen's in Birmingham. Both of them are priests in the Church of England, both of them profoundly wise and profoundly embodied theologians. Both of them, for their sins, are on the Faith and Order Commission of the Church of England. I think that's where they first met each other. Rachel is Archdeacon of Bolton and Salford, a poet and an author of many books now, but particularly for tonight, two on bodies, dazzling darkness, gender, sexuality, illness and God, and love's mysteries, the body, grief, precariousness and God. Carlton is a tutor at the Queen's Foundation and has most recently published an introduction to Caribbean contextual theology. And many of us have read his words and heard his voice in the daily watch and pray reflections from the Church of England that have led us through Lent this year, bringing his own deep wisdom, but also that of Selina Stone and her book, Tarry a While. I'm so excited to welcome them both here, to listen to them in conversation and for us to open our minds, bodies, hearts and souls to be moved by what they have to share with us tonight. Would you please welcome Rachel and Carlton?
That's a bit intimidating, Carlton. Does that work for you?
It works for me.
I said I would kick things off, but I think this really should be a conversation, Carlton. I mean, the darkness of God. I think one of the things that I want to acknowledge at the outset is that I have a lot of things to say about the dark God, about the darkness of God through my experience of ill health, of being a trans person who's transitioned, my experience of having been the target of all sorts of crap in my life. But where I want to start, and maybe I just want to kind of put it on the table really, is to acknowledge how I was raised and formed in a culture which treated darkness in a negative way and in a horrible way, often something to be afraid of. And I am a work in progress. I say this not in a performative way, but I think because of the kind of culture in which I grew up and the kind of background that I am and the skin color that I have, that I want to acknowledge my racism. You know, I'm a racist, but I'm working on it, and I've been working on it for decades. And it wasn't until I lived in Jamaica over 30 years ago that I really recognized these color coding systems. I just made assumptions that my skin color was normal. I remember walking around Kingston and people shout, "Hey, whitey," and recognizing that this was not a racist comment on those parts. I think racism's about power, but how in a place like Jamaica 30 years ago, it may have changed, that the lighter the skin color, the more privilege a person had. And so darkness was something that had been inscribed in those colonial cultures. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that. I mean, I don't know if you want to speak into that.
Yeah, fine. Well, if you put it like that, Rachel, let me say up front that I agree. Darkness has always been seen, certainly in our contemporary world, as negative, evil, bad. But let me acknowledge my own self-racism. This thing is so insidious because it's persons like myself who are Black who take on that same attitude towards ourselves. So it's nothing that just shapes white against Black. It shapes us all. And I really struggle for the kind of language, conceptual framework that blows that kind of thinking apart. I think if we can do that, that's a gift. The binary is the issue for me. The me versus you, the Black versus white. I don't want to live in a world like that. I want to live in a world with, I'm no artist, but pastel colors and all sorts of different things, but not Black versus white. Not me versus you. And not me against myself. Because that's where it comes to. So it's a deep thing, other than even deeper than the ways we think about. And I think that's unfortunate. Yeah. But darkness is a good place to take us, especially in Holy Week. Anyway, back to you, Rachel.
No, just unpack that a little bit. I mean, why Holy Week? You know, why is that? Why dark? I agree. I just want to hear.
I think we usually dramatize Holy Week as the thing we know. We have some consciousness about it. We know the story. We know the events. We can read it and we can reenact it. But I don't think you go through Holy Week if you're a political prisoner and read it the same way, or if you're beaten or dragged through the street, or if your name is is um is you're blasphemed against, or if you're crucified, or if you're raped, the list goes on. So there's a deeper encounter with the text if you have been broken by a violent world. So Holy Week is where this drama comes to a crescendo. And I think as a clergy person, I think we can get into the habit of going through the motions so easy. But if you're on the margins, you encounter that story more deeply. And it is a darkness that is very clear. But also, in the depth of it, there is the drama of a God who goes through it. And a whole lot of things are also there. It leads me to think of another thing, Rachel. Of course, I research, write, and think a lot about enslavement. For me, 400 years of a darkness like the crucifixion event of a week. But slavery and enslavement isn't the only thing that happened. Because in the midst of that, something grew. What grew was a strength. Resilience is a funny word, but a strength, there is something that survives past the horrors of a plantation society. And the only thing I could see that as, describe that as, is love and hope and goodness and ultimately joy. So when I look at my own life, I have a joy deeper than pain. And I think if we enter the darkness, we find something bigger than horror. And that's how I would unpack that. And that's not just my mind, that's just my own life and witness. Yeah.
I'm really struck by that idea that Holy Week can become something that's parceled and packaged. And hey, we're both priests. I get it. Liturgy holds stuff. It's a way of managing the impossible, trying to hold the incommensurate, that which is always getting away from us and threatening to break out. And hey, as we go through the steps of Holy Week, there is that comfort that can come from ritual. But what I'm hearing and what's resonating with my life, which hey, my frames of reference are different from yours in any number of ways, is God goes through it, but God doesn't go through it in a way which is comfortable or comforting for us, not in an obvious way, but also that there is a depth there that takes us to the darkness where there is promise and possibility. And yeah, there can be anxiety and fear and the reality of grief and that sense of stuff falling apart and unknowing and not having the words. But there is God, and gosh, I mean, how that absolutely, I mean, I feel it. How I absolutely feel that at a visceral level in my life is through my particularly my experience of chronic ill health and of disability. And I mean, I'm sat here and I guess I can present as someone who is, again, in stereotypical terms, I'm not disabled. Yet my body is just screaming at me all the time, and it's falling apart, and I'm in an absolutely awful phase of my Crohn's disease at the moment. And there can be a bleakness, Carlton. And there have been times in my life I just don't know if I can hang on. And there was an occasion, gosh, I mean, just when I was writing the first version of Dazzling Darkness over a decade ago, where I just was, you know, you're clinging on and then you let go. And it is a deep but dazzling darkness, and there is no evident light. And yet that's where God, the God of solidarity, the God of transformation, the God of the cross and the God of beyond the cross, I think can be found. And there is joy. And it's not the same as pleasure. And it's not the same as fun or happiness. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, interestingly enough, I'm speaking at the next SST. So this is a prelude to the kinds of things I want to say. And it's on prayer. And one of the things I talk about is that how do you pray in a context where you've been taught to pray by the same people who are beating the shit out of you? Sorry, Al.
Oh, no,
I'm trying to kill you and teaching you Christian prayers. And you're an African person and your blackness is a problem. And what do you do with that? What kind of Christian do you become? Who do you choose to be, one or the other? And one of the arguments I make is that prayer becomes a transgressive space, not just what you do in church. But when you're on carnival, I'm the jungle carnival. When you're in carnival, what do you think you're doing except but only praising who you are? You see it in our music in every possible way. There is a, Jamaicans call it livity, a liveliness, because you have to live. But here's the other thing about this kind of transgressive prayer. You pray against every false idea of God. And it's instrumentalized in all of your cultural ways. And because suddenly you realize that the Christianity that is shaping you isn't Christianity at all. So you learn to dig deep in the text for the truth. And it's that same journey past what you thought you knew. And it's like this Job text, which is a complex text. We can't read Job simplistically. But for Job, the other argument I want to make, and I'm not a biblical scholar, but read the text. It's fascinating. But for Job puts God on trial, like you do, like I would have done. And Job's biggest thing is that God needs to go on trial. God needs to answer for God's crimes. If God was truly God, this would not have happened to him. But when you read the conversations with the friends and the ultimate conversation with God, beyond the framing of the book of Job, the text, there is a sense in which Job is challenging the idolatry of what he thought was God, just to find a real God. And this descent is like, it's one of these things. You find that the darkness isn't darkness at all. It's filled with, Selena writes, somebody said it, or Selena wrote it. It's filled with plenitude. It's full, it's charged, there's potential, it's generative, it is creative. You go into my context and you realize we are filled with creativity. Why? Because we have had to reject the kind of Jesus that brutalizes me.
So I want to come, but I also think, oh God, just shut up, mate. It's just, I mean, there's things that I want to say and I can't quite find the words. And part of what I want to say is that I need to not come along here and create a false equivalence in terms of the shit I've had to deal. Because gosh, the power of the word when you talk about the Christian slave, white slave master, I mean, oh my, what I want to speak into is that notion of the generative. And this is something I've written about in a number of places about, darkness is it's the darkness of the womb, of a new making, of the possible. And the thing about wombs is that they are, by their nature, as generative places of community. Yeah. And dependence and mutuality. And yeah, there are problems with overstating that metaphor of the womb. I can see how that can exclude people as well as include people. But the God who needs to die, the God who needs to die is not the generative God.
No,
absolutely.
it's an idea.
And in my own experience of being this body and the kind of society we are, it has been that search for the living God beyond the God who needs to die. Maybe the God who actually dies on the cross. I mean, there's a whole, in feminist theology, there's this whole thing about, the patriarchal God dying on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And that's that God the Father, that's that God dying for Jesus, dying for the new Christian community, which is formed at the cross amongst the women. Yeah. As a trans woman, as a queer person, as a member of the LGBT community, but who's white as well. Here's the strange double bind I find myself in that I can so readily take a kind of safety in the received church, in the kind of these liturgies that we have. Yeah, because there's a sense in which, hey, I can go stealth. I can, this is an interesting concept in the trans community, sort of going, but I can just go stealth. I can play the white middle class person who's got all this authority. I'm an archdeacon. I fit in. And yet words are dying in my mouth. They are turning to dust in my mouth so much of the time. And yet sometimes I'm at the edge of feeling like they're food too, but they're dying in my mouth because I'm searching for the God in whose company I too am cherished. I'm the God who I can cherish too, because I need to call out the God that needs to die.
I mean, Rachel, I think of someone like you. You remind me of a prophetic figure. I know. You probably won't want to take that to yourself. Just my thinking, okay? But we usually embody the very message and the very thing we need to teach the world, and probably teach your church. That's my church too. But
yeah, well, we're very good.
And you don't go through that ambiguity and suffering and silent dust, words falling to dust in your mouth, because something deep down knows and resonates with the same darkness where you found true God. And that won't let you leave. Like it will not let you go. Um, but I wonder if that very courage to live who you are is almost the very thing. It's like light shining. Look, let's be honest. Let's be honest about who we really are. Thank God you're honest and ask the questions. My biggest issue is that in our church, often we're not being truly honest. We're being political. We even being academic and theological. We're not really being honest. Look around our world. Let's be honest. This is like hell going on outside, inside. But I think the kinds of people who are willing to abandon their idolatry to find a God who will not be shaped into our image and likeness are the people who will teach us the way forward. I want to be like one of them.
You are.
I try my best. This is what I just want to live authentically. Simple. Life is too short. It's just too short for some of this nonsense. Yeah.
The challenge is finding words, or rather having the courage to tarry in the silence or tarry in the darkness, to dwell in the grief, because I can't speak, you'll tell me if this resonates with you, but I feel the pressure as a leader in the church, as someone who has some modest influence in a number of areas, to come up with solutions, to get there quickly, to make the boat go faster, as it were. And yet, if we're talking about the hellscape of reality, if we're talking about the kind of facts which are presenting to are present to us, well, easy words, ready words, off the shelf words, they are just guaranteed to turn to dust, or they'll have hidden razor blades in there, and we'll sort of think, oh, this is great, these are nutritious, and then they cut us to shreds. The challenge of the dark God for me is to let God be God. And then, when you talked about that place being a place of love, well, I'm there. But of course, for so many people, they'll say, oh, that's a cop-out. They've gone to the easy place. Whereas actually, I think it's the hard place where we are sat for 7 days. Yeah.
Friends, one of the things when you first started that I thought about is not just the dark God, but what can hide in the light. We perceive it to be light. And the way I want to express that thought is Jesus's consistent railing against his religious leaders, as well as Roman colonial rule, equally. And what seems to be stable and tradition, and what seems to be where God dwells and God is, often hides deep emptiness and nothingness. and some dark stuff like shame, guilt, power, control, this kind of stuff. Jesus comes at this. For example, the woman, don't know, you're a priest, you probably know this. I have no idea where this is in the Bible. But the woman, the woman who gives in her penny and the rest is giving for show. And Jesus said she gave more. Like he is showing how all that outward show hides so much nothingness. And let's say darkness, not dazzling darkness, just darkness. And then this is the same Jesus who goes into the temple where everyone should be fed by God in and turns over the table of the money changers with indignation and rage. There is something about exposing light that is not light at all. So in a colonial society, yes, light is currency. Whiteness is a currency. It's the standard. It's the thing we aspire to. And whiteness is the thing whereby everything else is judged as illegitimate. Jesus would be one who would say, that's the biggest darkness or whatever word. This is just not true, not right, and definitely not not godly. So all the attempts at deconstructing whiteness and that we have going on is precisely this thing, exposing what we perceive to be light, not as light at all, not in any God, in God's economy. It is something else. It's another game. It's a game of the idolatrous system. And we need to be attentive to this. So as much as we talk about darkness, we need to deal with the facade of our constructed whiteness. And that's some deep work to be done. We love it. We love it like McDonald's. I don't love McDonald's.
I do, but I always regret it afterwards. That's the thing about McDonald's, is that it has this, it just leaves your stomach so empty, doesn't it, afterwards? Yet there is this compulsion to it. And I think, one of the things that Christ is exposing during this Holy Week, particularly, is the way in which power, seeking after power, desire to retain power, leads a number of people to want to position themselves as, to use that term that's used in peacekeeping, white hats. Oh, we're the white hats. And actually, I think one of the things that, and this is where it does bite for me. This is why, Holy Week will always be that week which just grips me, is it exposes my desire, but also our culture's desire to position itself in the place of goodness and a shallow light, and a light that does not in any way reflect the glory of God. That there is this, hey, this is that thing of, there are very few people out there who would want to say that they were bad people. There are very few societies out there that would want to say they were bad societies. They weren't able to bring about human flourishing. Yet there are these structural sins that just, these seeming tentacles of light that actually are a greater darkness that is not holy at all.
And this is where I'm left with, I guess, in my work and my thinking as I grow and mature further, as theologian, but also as a priest, because I'm a priest. That's fundamentally who I am. What facing oneself is the most courageous thing you can do. Self-honesty. We can do that as individuals, and yeah, that's hard for us to do. Rachel, how do we face ourselves as a church? That's my big question. How do we look into the mirror and actually see who we are? And I'm not talking as someone distant from it and in it, but see who we are and how we're affected. First of all, to see that we're not as pretty as we think. And secondly, how we have been marring and injuring and lashing and abusing those within us. And I find that's a real important question for me. Not so much that it happens out, it does, but how do we see ourselves? Because I don't think you really want to look. And I say that honestly as somebody who's a work here in the UK. I have a whole other context in the Caribbean. Same thing. Do we see ourselves? How do we do that collectively?
I hope you're not passing that across to me for the answer, because that's the question. Those, I mean, this may sound absurdly pious. If it is, so be it. Those who seek to save their lives will lose it. Those who lose their lives for my sake will save it. Now, we often, because we live in an individualistic society, frame that in personal terms. And I know what that means. I can give an account of that in personal terms. But what if that is a corporate community vocation? Now, that requires a kind of absurd courage, but also a recognition that we're not in the business of saving ourselves or saving the institution or saving face or looking good, giving ourselves some kind of, I don't know, spiritual Botox that just makes us sort of fixed in a particular position. It's about letting go. And that is just so difficult to do, because that's actually, I mean, for the Church of England, we are so entangled in looking good, but also these half acknowledged, I suppose, what culture of privilege and position. We love to be stroked by those in power. We love the places where we get to speak. And I don't underestimate that. I really don't, because here's the thing is that I don't think you can legitimately be prepared to let that go if you do not know just how seemingly tasty that is. I'm not going to get into sort of McDonald's metaphors again here, but it's like, this just, yeah. And if I were there, if we are there, we can speak and we can do this and we have influence. And yet, is that where the living God is? Is that the God position?
So when I came to this country in 2008 to do a master's degree, So after that, I came back in 2009, and I became a priest in Walsall in the Black Country for 8 years. And the newspaper said, from Bahamas to Black Country. I thought it was so cute. But it was I honestly I enjoyed ministry. And this was a poor estate. And I've seen my whole idea of England had to be reconceptualized because I'm dwelling in poverty, and people who are trying to make ends meet, people who are on benefits, people who are on every um mental health medication you could think of. The list goes on. And I love them, and they love me, and we got on great. They couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand them, but we got on great. But what I really found amazing, and I have a heart for this, when you simply level with people and they know you care, just care. No judgment, just care. On honesty. I think that's the kind of growth we need. A growth in a consciousness, a new way of being, an alternative way of living out the good news. And I think you go in and around England, in the UK, and you find this dynamic. You find that the I guess halls of power, that it's its own space. But out there's a whole other kind of power. It's like people power, honest power, blue collar power. Let's go to the pub together power. But and I think this is where a whole lot of investment needs to be. And I think it's like let's get to that depth. Let's swim in, because I think that's where the dazzling God is, to be honest. Right down the margins.
Dazzling and fabulous.
Fabulous.
Should we open for some other comments, questions?
What we have been doing the last few weeks is just having a brief pause, both here and online, for people to stretch their legs and let things settle, have a bit of a breather, and then give people the chance for a bit of a conversation together, and then come back to you two, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If you're happy to pause there, then that's brilliant. Feels like there's so much. And so the question for us when we come back, let's have 10 minutes to pause. And by the time I finish talking, it's probably going to be 8:05 when we come back together. So let's come back together at 8:05. Pause, breathe, stretch your legs, make a cup of tea, whatever we need to do. And as in previous weeks, the question that we've been asking is just simply, what is stirring for you? It may be a penny drop moment. It may be feelings going on in our guts that we're noticing. It may be a wondering or a wrestling or a struggling with a question. That Rachel and Carlton's conversation has kind of intensified for us. But what is stirring for us? That's the question. So let's let things settle. Let's breathe and stretch our legs. Let's come back together at 5:05. We'll have some time in some circles, some small groups online. And let's have 20 minutes for that. So until 8:25. And then we'll have about 20-25 minutes for a bit of conversation altogether. It's all right. So thank you. Joy, would you like to come up and help lead us in some final prayers? And while Joy's coming this way, one last thank you to Modern Church and to Queen's Foundation for partnering with us on this journey through Lent. A thank you to all of our speakers, to Rachel and Carlton tonight, and for all those others who have so generously given their time and their wisdom over the past few weeks and opened up all kinds of fascinating seams of conversation. Thank you to all of you who have been part of it over the weeks, both online and on site here, and have helped make it happen. Thank you to Sarah Lamming, who has enabled the Zoom end of things to go so amazingly smoothly in ways that I couldn't possibly imagine, and certainly my worst nightmares got nowhere near. Thank you to all of you. I'm so grateful. We're going to finish with a couple of prayers. A prayer by Cole Arthur Riley in Black Liturgies for Good Friday, as we look towards the other end of this week, and a blessing by Nicholas Slee, written for John Hull and Mike Holroyd, two friends of hers who knew the darkness of being blind, and out of that darkness offer a blessing to us on these days to come and the days that follow. Joy comes.
God of the long night, thank you for being a God, not just solidarity, with deep and raw emotion. God who did not endure violence, silence, but who spoke and cried as your body was broken on the cross. Help us to understand that our memory of you becomes more whole when we remember you alongside the injustices with which you suffered in solidarity. The hunger, the abuse, the loneliness of the world. Today, let us grieve the path of the cross. Illness, violence, alienation, the degradation of land, and all pain unspoken. Let us weep and rest. Reveal yourself to us. Remind us of a God who knows the weight of oppression, and help us believe that truly you are with us. That your cause is our cause, no less than justice and liberation in life and death.
And the darkness of God will be to you a blessing, and the night shall become for you a path, and you shall walk in it with joy and gladness, and you shall run in it with head held high. And no marauding beast will assail you, and no unclean thing bar your way, for angels will guard you as you walk there, and guide you under the shadow of their wings, until at last you reach the gate of hope and go in under the doorway of delight, to be welcomed into the citadel of freedom, and to rest your soul under the portals of love. And there you shall be royally feasted and seated in the banquet of love, and you shall hear your name called gently, and you shall enter into the darkness and gladness of God. And the blind shall lead you into God's dazzling darkness, and the deaf shall lead you into God's silent darkness, and the dumb shall lead you into God's eloquent darkness, and the lame shall lead you into God's dancing darkness, For in that city no lamp will shine, no sun or moon adorn the sky. For the darkness of God will lighten every sadness, and the splendor of divine darkness will dazzle every eye. And the fullness of divine glory will overshadow every longing, and the secret of divine beauty will satisfy every desire. And so the darkness of God shall be a blessing, and the shadow of God will be to you a light more lovely than the dawn, a lamp more gleaming than the sun. And your blindness shall be the mark of your faithfulness, and God's faithfulness shall be sealed by the star of everlasting night. Amen. Thank you all.